First of all, orbital trauma. Have we done orbital trauma already? Yes or no? Have we done orbital trauma already? Yes, we have already done it. In our chapter on trauma, we have already done it. That the most common fracture is the floor blowout fracture, teardrop sign, that if the root fractures, blah, blah, blah. The second thing that you should know are the walls of orbit, which I again think you know. Okay. So there are four things. There is the roof, there is the floor, there is the medial wall, and there is the lateral wall. If you want to just remember one question, please remember that what is the most common to fracture? Floor. But what is the thinnest, everybody? So just two or three simple questions. Most common to fracture is the floor. This is part of your anatomy actually, okay? But the thinnest wall is which wall, everybody? Okay, so thinnest wall, everybody, very good. Arup has answered for all of you. Medial wall. Okay, everybody. The thinnest is the medial wall, lamina papyracea, if you want to call it. Okay, everybody. And this is the thinnest wall. That's all. That's all I can tell you here as part of walls of orbit. Then, if you study the orbit in detail, I will cover it somewhere in the coming topics. You need to know infraorbital foramen, supraorbital foramen, and whatever structures we pass through it. I hope you know it. Do you know it, guys? Infraorbital foramen, supraorbital foramen, and optic canal. Guys, three things. Yes. Okay. If you know this, then good enough. If you don't know it, then I'll be covering it in the causes of proptosis, and I'll be trying to explain you through that. Okay. Now, what we want to study is the topic proptosis. 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 Okay, everybody. So, what is proptosis? What is proptosis? This is proptosis. What am I trying to do? What am I trying to do? मैं दिखाना चाह रहा हूँ, trying to show you protrusion. आंखें बाहर निकल गई. Tom and Jerry cartoon. Okay, everybody. So, proptosis is protrusion. Protrusion of eyeball, or I can say forward displacement of eyeball. I hope you understand this. Forward displacement of eyeball. Done, everybody? Now, how do we measure proptosis? So to measure proptosis can also be called as, if you remember Graves' disease, I can also call proptosis as exophthalmos. Yes, guys. So to see it, we have something called an exophthalmometer. So this is an exophthalmometer. The photograph is in front of you. Just identify this instrument. This can be asked as an identification. So Hertel's exophthalmometer. Okay, everybody, just remember this. This is used to identify or diagnose or measure exophthalmos or proptosis. Am I clear? Simple. Now, what are the causes of proptosis? Causes of proptosis. So basically, if I try to explain you in simple words, it can be of two types. One is called as axial proptosis, and the second is called as abaxial proptosis. What is the difference, everybody? Everybody, axial means in straight line. So let me just draw a cut section of an orbit for you. If you remember such a cut section, I had drawn in my probably lesson 1 or lesson 2 whenever explaining you peribulbar and retrobulbar route. Okay, so this is the lateral wall, this is the medial wall, this is the apex of the orbit, and this is the base of the orbit. This is where my eyeball is present. Yes, guys, this is my iris, and this is my optic nerve. Am I clear till now? Now, everybody, if there is a tumor which is present here, let's say, everybody, I'm just giving an option. If there is a tumor which is present here, let's say a tumor of the optic nerve itself, optic nerve glioma, okay, which type of proptosis will it cause? Axial or abaxial? A or B? Optic nerve tumor, optic nerve glioma. What will it lead to? Axial or abaxial? Anybody? 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 Axial proptosis or abaxial proptosis? Think about it. The tumor is growing, so what kind of force will it apply? Where will it apply the force? Think about it. It's an optic nerve tumor. Optic nerve tumor is right behind the eyeball. If this is my eyeball, this is my optic nerve, the tumor is right behind the eyeball. So the tumor will press my eyeball straight forward. Yes. So 75% of you are right. Mitul, Jinal, Arup, Sambit, Vijay, Sanket, Hasitha. All of you are right, but some of you are wrong also. Right. So axial basically means protrusion along the anteroposterior axis. Okay. So the answer to this question will be axial. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say here. Yes. So because the tumor is present right behind the eyeball, it will push it straight forward. So I will just write it: protrusion along the anteroposterior axis. Okay, everybody. So any tumor which is present right behind the eyeball, it will lead to axial proptosis. So examples, if I want to give you, I will say optic nerve glioma. Or if I say, everybody, that you have a case of orbital cellulitis, inflammation will lead to swelling of all the contents of the orbit. All the contents of the orbit will again push the eyeball straight forward. Am I clear to everybody? Or let's say I say cavernous sinus thrombosis. Yes, this will also call axial proptosis. Now let's talk about abaxial. Everybody, just to explain you abaxial, let's say these are my eyelids. This is my eyeball. Where is lacrimal gland present? This is my nose, let's say. Where is lacrimal gland present? This is where lacrimal gland is present. Yes or no? Supratemporally. So if there is a lacrimal gland tumor, if there is a lacrimal gland tumor, it will grow here. So where it will push the eyeball, everybody, it will push the eyeball here, and it will push the eyeball here. Yes or no? Am I clear? Because the lacrimal gland is present here. Look at me, everybody. Supratemporally, when a tumor will grow, what it will do? The tumor will put pressure and will push my eyeball down and in. Am I clear to everybody? Because the position is supratemporal, the force applied will be inferior and medial. Am I clear to everybody? So abaxial will be example lacrimal gland tumor. Are you understanding what I'm saying, everybody? I'm just giving you few examples, but if you apply your brain, anything which is behind the eyeball will cause axial. Other things will cause abaxial. Okay. Or if I say, let's say you have a ethmoid or a maxillary sinus tumor, let's say. You have a maxillary sinus tumor. Maxillary sinus tumor. Okay, everybody? So maxillary sinus tumor will again not cause a axial proptosis. It will cause an abaxial proptosis. Do we get this point here, everybody? Lacrimal gland tumor pushes down and in. Lacrimal gland tumor pushes down and in. Done, everybody? So this is axial and abaxial proptosis. Now, there are lots of questions which are asked on proptosis, so I will go from easy to difficult, and I will make it very, very easy for you, everybody. Okay, let's see it. So proptosis, clinical features, presentations, whatever you want to call it. Straight single line question. Number one, question number one. Okay, proptosis that increases on bending forward, or with Valsalva maneuver. The answer is orbital varices. The answer is orbital varices. Okay, everybody, done. Please remember for orbital varices that if you have orbital varices, they are always unilateral. Orbital varices are always unilateral. Orbital varices present in which age? I know this is a little unknown topic for all of us. Let's try to go it simply. Orbital varices present in child age, everybody. So either childhood or teenage, you can call it. Okay, everybody, that is the age of presentation. If you touch orbital varices, what kind of consistency do we call it? Bag of worms. It feels like a bag of worms, orbital varices. Am I clear to everybody? Then it is a compressible lesion or a non-compressible lesion. So we call it a compressible lesion. I hope you know what are varices. Yes or no? These are enlargement of venous system. Orbital varices, basically congenital or non-congenital. Okay. So if you want to solve any question on orbital varices, first of all, the question will be writing proptosis. Search for the word unilateral. Okay. Then search for the age. This is how you will be able to solve questions on proptosis. First of all, if proptosis word is mentioned, unilateral or bilateral, then look at the age, and then look at the feature. Compressible lesion, bag of worms, increases on bending forward. Done, everybody? That's all about orbital varices. Nothing much here. Now, question 2. Everybody, if you have, everybody, pulsatile proptosis. If you have pulsatile proptosis, anybody can tell me the answer? Pulsatile proptosis. So pulsatile proptosis, the answer is keratico-cavernous fistula. Keratico-cavernous fistula. Okay, everybody? Keratico-cavernous fistula. Or the other cause of pulsatile proptosis can be neurofibromatosis 1. Neurofibromatosis 1 due to orbital roof bony defects. Orbital roof bony defects are usually found in neurofibromatosis 1. They also lead to pulsatile proptosis, but the usual answer is keratico-cavernous fistula. Now, what do you mean by fistula? Fistula between the artery and the vein. AV fistula between the carotid artery and cavernous sinus. Okay. So this is I'll just write it for you in brief, everybody. So this is a fistula between carotid artery and cavernous sinus. Okay. Now, how to diagnose it? Is it unilateral or bilateral? Almost always you will find that if there is pulsatile proptosis due to keratico-cavernous fistula, this will be bilateral. Okay. This is bilateral. This is pulsatile. It is causing pulsatile proptosis. You already know, and it presents with clinical feature. If I ask you, it presents with what? Everybody it presents with? Anybody? It will present with third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerve palsy. It will present with third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerve palsy. Plus, there will be raised intraocular pressure. Why will there be raised intraocular pressure, everybody? Because of keratico-cavernous fistula, episcleral vein pressure will increase. If the episcleral vein pressure will increase, it will lead to what do you say? Blockage of trabecular outflow, and thus it will increase the intraocular pressure. Okay, everybody, that's your simple answer. Keratico-cavernous fistula, because of cavernous sinus involvement, there is third, fourth, and sixth cranial palsy. It is always bilateral. It occurs due to trauma usually. Please remember this also. And that's it, I think. Okay, one more question is asked. I think you should know the answer. Cavernous sinus fistula, keratico-cavernous. What is the investigation of choice? So the investigation of choice is what, everybody? Digital subtraction, carotid angiography. Yes, DSCA, everybody. Angiography. Done. I hope there is no confusion on this. So these are two conditions: orbital varices and keratico-cavernous fistula, which have totally different features: unilateral, bilateral, increases on bending forward. This is pulsatile. This also presents with other ocular signs of third nerve, fourth nerve, and sixth nerve palsy. So basically, there will be no ocular movement. Third nerve, fourth nerve, sixth nerve, all the extraocular muscles are paralyzed, and along with that, there is increased IOP. Whereas in orbital varices, you will not find usually any other ocular clinical features. Yeah? Now, third question, everybody: proptosis, which increases with upper respiratory tract infection. The answer is orbital lymphangiomas. Fourth question: proptosis which increases on crying. Answer is what, everybody? Capillary hemangioma. Okay, so these are straightforward questions. I would hope that none of you would have a problem with these questions, and you would be able to solve these questions very simply and very easily yourself. Right? Now let's come on to the three conditions or two conditions rather, which usually confuse students. What are the two conditions which usually confuse students are cavernous sinus thrombosis and orbital apex syndrome. So you can call it CST, cavernous sinus thrombosis, and orbital apex syndrome. Okay. So to understand what will be the causation or what will be the presentation in CST and orbital apex syndrome, the first thing that you want to know is what passes through CST and what passes through orbital apex syndrome. Okay, everybody. Now, cavernous sinus. What is passing through cavernous sinus? Through cavernous sinus, which nerves are passing? Third nerve, fourth nerve, then fifth nerve, first branch. What is the first branch of fifth nerve, everybody? Ophthalmic nerve. Then fifth nerve, second branch. What is the second branch, everybody? Maxillary nerve. And then which nerve, everybody? Sixth nerve. Yes. But orbital apex. What is it? What is orbital apex, everybody? Orbital apex is comprised of superior orbital fissure. Am I correct? Superior orbital fissure. Plus, what is also present in the orbital apex, everybody? Optic canal. So now, everybody, that is where the difference comes. Superior orbital fissure transmits what, everybody? Third nerve, fourth nerve, fifth one, fifth two, and sixth. Okay. But what is added now, everybody? Added now is the second cranial nerve, because the second cranial nerve passes through the optic canal. You understand the basic difference here, everybody? Yes? Now, another difference which is there is that in cavernous sinus thrombosis, sixth nerve is the earliest or the first affected. Earliest affected. But in orbital apex syndrome, all the nerves are affected together, concurrently. Okay, so there will be no presentation first and then after. There will be concurrent. Ek saath sab kuch hoga. Am I clear to everybody? So this is the difference. First of all, the second nerve is also affected in orbital apex syndrome, and then cavernous sinus thrombosis, sixth nerve is first affected, whereas in orbital apex syndrome, all the cranial nerves are affected together. Right, guys? We understand this till now. Now let's move on, everybody. Next page. Okay. So laterality, everybody. Cavernous sinus thrombosis is always bilateral. Unilateral, then 24 to 48 hours, it becomes bilateral. Okay, everybody. So cavernous sinus thrombosis is almost always bilateral. It starts in one eye, then within 24 to 48 hours, the other eye will also be affected. But in cases of orbital apex syndrome, what will you see, everybody? That orbital apex syndrome is almost always unilateral. Okay, everybody. Then, what about my vision? What about my vision? Will there be any vision loss in CST? Yes or no? Will there be any vision loss in CST? Yes or no? Are you sleeping? I hope you are not sleeping. Cavernous sinus thrombosis, loss of vision, yes or no? Vision, yes or no? Loss, yes or no? Somebody has answered yes. Vision will be lost, yes or no? Second nerve, is it affected in cavernous sinus thrombosis? No. If second nerve is not affected, vision will not be lost. Vision will remain absolutely normal. Am I clear to everybody? Very later on stages, it may be lost, but we will say vision is normal. But everybody, vision will be lost early loss of vision, yes, because second nerve optic canal is affected in orbital apex syndrome. I hope you understand this. Then everybody, the next point of difference that we need to understand is what, everybody, if cranial nerves are paralyzed, what is occurring, everybody? So there is, I will say, complete ophthalmoplegia. Ophthalmoplegia means extraocular muscle palsy. Okay, so no ocular movement basically. So extraocular muscle palsy, no ocular movement. Because all the nerves are paralyzed, third nerve, fourth nerve, sixth nerve, there will be complete ophthalmoplegia. In orbital apex syndrome, also it will be complete, but concurrent. Concurrent मतलब together. सब कुछ एक साथ होगा. यहाँ पे क्या होगा? Sixth nerve will be paralyzed first. Okay, everybody. Here sixth nerve will be paralyzed first. As I already told you, it will be complete but concurrent. Then in both the diseases, what will be the similarity? Ophthalmic nerve and maxillary nerve both are being paralyzed, V1 and V2. Yes, that is why there will be loss of corneal reflex. Corneal reflex is by which nerve, everybody? Trigeminal ophthalmic. So there will be loss of corneal reflex. I'm just writing same. Okay, so there will be loss of corneal reflex between both. So there are certain similarities, but there are certain differences also. I hope you understand how to be able to differentiate. There are other differences also. What are the other differences, everybody? In cavernous sinus thrombosis, due to the fact that it is pushing all the contents axially, everybody. Yes or no? Cavernous sinus thrombosis. What will be seen, everybody? You will see that there is marked chemosis. What is chemosis, everybody? What is chemosis? Chemosis is swelling of conjunctiva. Swelling of conjunctiva. Marked chemosis. Whereas in cases of orbital apex syndrome, it may or may not be present. It is mild chemosis. Necessarily, that will not be a presenting feature. So please remember, this will be marked chemosis. Okay, everybody. So vision is absolutely normal. This is bilateral. Done. Now let's move on. Just ending our differentiation so that you are able to solve all the questions. Everybody, see again, it starts here. If you remember this, you will be able to understand everything. All the muscles are affected, so there is complete external ophthalmoplegia. These nerves are affected, so there is loss of corneal reflex. But second nerve is not affected, so there is no loss of vision. 3, 4, 6, complete ophthalmoplegia together. V1, V2, loss of corneal reflex. Second nerve, so there is what? Loss of vision. The difference bilateral, unilateral, that you need to remember. Okay, everybody. So if you remember this, you remember both the conditions. Basically, that's the funda here. Yes. Then just to answer it for you, there is edema in mastoid region. In cavernous sinus thrombosis, there is edema in mastoid region, but here it is absent. So these are just certain differences between orbital apex syndrome and cavernous sinus thrombosis for you. I hope you will be able to answer questions on both these conditions now, you will be able to differentiate. You will no more fear these words and orbital varices and keratoconus fistula and other such conditions. Right, guys? Done. Now, to complete my topic, everybody, I will just discuss now orbital cellulitis. In short, in simple with you, orbital cellulitis. What do you understand by orbital cellulitis? Orbital cellulitis, or not understand, let me ask you, what is the most common cause of orbital cellulitis? So the most common cause of orbital cellulitis, everybody, is what? Extension from ethmoid sinus. Okay, so extension from ethmoidal sinusitis. So if you had ethmoidal sinusitis, the infection through the lamina papyracea or the medial bone came into my orbit. Okay, that is the most common cause, and it will involve all the contents of the orbit. Done. It is usually found to be orbital cellulitis unilateral. Okay, it is usually found to be unilateral, and the vision may be lost. Yes, the vision may be lost. Vision loss, plus because all the nerves are also present in the orbit, there will be complete ophthalmoplegia. But here the corneal reflex will be present. It will not affect my trigeminal nerve. Corneal reflex will be present. Okay, so certain similarities and differences. I hope we are clear about this. Then what is the classification, everybody? That is what I'm interested in. Classification. So the classification is called Chandler's classification. Chandler's classification of orbital cellulitis. So it basically tells us that grade 1 is called as preseptal, or stage 1 or grade 1, whatever you want to call it, is called as preseptal cellulitis. Preseptal. Okay, everybody. So there is preseptal edema of eyelids. That is the main presenting complaint. Preseptal edema of eyelids. Then in stage 2, what occurs, everybody? In stage 2 occurs what we are reading, proptosis plus ophthalmoplegia. Okay, everybody. Plus you will also get systemic symptoms, pain, fever, etc. In stage 3, what occurs now? That the infection is becoming severe, periosteal abscess. This is what we fear, because the abscess, there is collection of pus. Okay, everybody. This will result in obviously abscess will accumulate, and it will also increase the proptosis. Then in stage 4, what occurs, everybody? Stage 4 occurs loss of vision. Stage 5, we say that there will be extension into the cavernous sinus. There will be extension into cavernous sinus. Okay. So if there is only stage 1 and stage 2, we do not need to do surgical exploration. But if there is stage 3 and forward, there is an abscess which is forming, we need to do surgical exploration and we need to treat it. Otherwise, you can just maintain on systemic antibiotics and treat your basically underlying infection. Okay, everybody. So whenever a patient of orbital cellulitis is coming to you, that is your main idea. You do an MRI, you do a CT scan, you try to find out whether an abscess has formed, whether it has gone post-septal, and whether a surgical exploration is needed or not. Okay, and that's it about my orbital cellulitis here. Nothing more to explain, guys. Simple question, simple answer, everybody. Now, few of the questions which are asked previously, I don't know if they will be asked now. Most common causes of proptosis. Most common cause of proptosis. Number 1, adults. Adults, the most common cause of proptosis is thyroid associated ophthalmopathy, or what you usually call as Graves' disease. Okay, everybody, what you usually call as Graves' disease, thyroid associated ophthalmopathy. But in children, everybody, the most common cause is, anybody, most common cause is what we were discussing just now, orbital cellulitis, unilateral, and AML, or you can call it leukemia, if bilateral proptosis. Okay, everybody. So in children, the cause of proptosis is different if unilateral or if bilateral. I know, guys, it's a little boring, orbit and all these conditions, but I hope you are understanding stuff. I hope you are remembering stuff, how to solve questions, because usually questions from orbit are the questions which students find difficult. So that's why I'm just trying to give you pointers on how to solve these questions. Okay, everybody. Now, if I talk to you about thyroid associated ophthalmopathy, obviously I would hope that you have read it a lot in your subject on medicine. Everybody, I'll just be asking you 2 or 3 simple questions. Everybody, what is the most common sign of thyroid associated ophthalmopathy? Anybody can tell me what is the most common sign of thyroid associated ophthalmopathy? Anybody? Anybody? Okay, so I'll give you options. Option A, von Graffi sign. Option B, Dalrymple sign. Option C, Cocker's sign. I hope you remember all these names. And let's take an option D also, just for completing the options. I hope you understand that it is not the answer. Stellwagens sign. Stellwagens sign. Okay, everybody. So let me see whether you know what is the most common sign in thyroid associated ophthalmopathy. Okay, majority of you are falling for the what do you say? False positive answer. I expect the false positive answer. Yes, I expected. That is the only 3 people are right. Actually, Sambit, Hashita, and Vijay. Everybody else is wrong. 3 are right and 6 are wrong. It seems, or 5 are wrong based on the percentage. I don't know how many of you have answered. Total number I don't get. So only Sambit, Vijay, and Hashita were right, and the answer was Dalrymple sign. The answer was what, everybody? Dalrymple. I know you think von Graffi because that is the most common sign we know of. Does not make it the most common sign, everybody. Dalrymple sign. What is Dalrymple sign? What is Dalrymple sign, everybody? Lid retraction. What is Dalrymple sign, everybody? Lid retraction. Lid retraction means it is like this. Yes or no? Yes, lid retraction. What is the, so this is the most common sign, everybody, Dalrymple. What is von Graffi sign? Anybody who would like to tell me? Anybody who would like to tell me what is von Graffi sign? Anybody who can tell me what is von Graffi sign? Yes, try to answer yourself, everybody. What is von Graffi sign? Von Graffi sign is lid lag. Von Graffi sign is these two words. I just write it in red color so that you remember. I'm writing it lid lag. What do you mean by lid lag? What do you mean by lid lag, guys? Everybody, look at my eyes. When I look down, when I will look down, my eyeball will move down, but not my eyelid, everybody. Everybody, now I'm looking down. Okay. My eyeball has moved down and even my eyelid has moved down. Yes. So we say the upper eyelid follows the movement of the eyeball. If I look down, my upper eyelid goes down. If I look up, my upper eyelid goes up. You understand? But lid lag means due to proptosis, everybody, there is sub fat deposition. Yes or no in the orbit. So there is proptosis. Due to the proptosis, when I look down, now everybody assume I am a case of thyroid associated ophthalmopathy. Now if I look down, notice my upper eyelid. I look down. Has my upper eyelid gone down completely? No. So even though my eyeball has gone down, my eyelid does not go down. So I'm saying my eyelid lags behind the movement of my eyeball, and that is what is von Graffi sign. Do we understand this? Yes or no? So normally my eyelid goes down. Here my eyelid lags behind the movement of my eyeball. Hey guys, done? Now, some other questions on thyroid associated ophthalmopathy that they commonly ask you. So the question that they ask you is, what is the earliest muscle involved in thyroid associated ophthalmopathy? Earliest muscle involved in thyroid associated ophthalmopathy. Okay, anybody answer? Inferior rectus, medial rectus, inferior oblique, or superior rectus? Option A, B, C, D. What is the answer? What is the earliest muscle involved in thyroid associated ophthalmopathy? Okay, it seems you're answering all the things. A, B, C, all are 33%. Now A and C are 40%, B is 20%. The class is divided. The class does not know this. Yeah, this is a very old question. You should have been able to answer this. Okay, so Sambit, Jinal, and VJ3 are right. Sambit, Jinal, and VJ3 are right, and 4 are wrong. The answer is inferior rectus. The earliest muscle involved is inferior rectus. Then the second question, it is more confusing. What is the earliest restriction of action? Earliest restriction of ocular movement, I will say. Earliest restriction of ocular movement. The options are adduction, abduction, depression, or elevation. Again, option A, B, C, D. The earliest muscle involved is inferior rectus. Yes, but what is the earliest restriction of ocular movement? Half of you answered no. Again, one third. A, C, and D, 33%. Okay, now A, B, C, D, 25, 25, 25, 25. So basically, okay. Now maximum people have answered B option till now. B is wrong if anybody is left. Only one person is right. I don't know who that person is. I have not gotten the basically the name. But the answer here is, who is the one person who was right? Elevation. Okay, everybody. So the earliest muscle involved is inferior rectus, but the earliest restriction of ocular movement found to be is elevation. This is due to what? Basically, inferior rectus is being involved, which is leading to a restrictive squint. If you understand, it is an example of what, everybody? Restrictive squint. The muscle is getting restricted. Inferior rectus is not able to relax. That is why superior rectus is not able to contract. And that is why the earliest restriction of ocular movement is elevation. Am I clear to everybody? I hope there is no confusion about this. These are certain questions on thyroid associated ophthalmopathy. And that's all about the topic orbit from my side. I hope you've been able to understand. No, there is one more thing left. So sorry guys, let me just bring up a photograph on the screen. These questions are asked, commonly asked. I'll just bring this up on the screen for you, everybody. I just made a list of these questions, everybody. I hope you can read it. Orbit related most common, instead of writing it. These questions are asked as it is, so I've just written it. What is the most common cystic orbital lesion? So I hope all of you can see it. So these are the questions which are asked. I hope you just read all these questions and answer this. This question has been asked previously. Most common malignant orbital tumor in adults. Okay, everybody. This question has also been asked. What is the most common orbital malignant tumor in pediatric age group? Rhabdomyosarcoma. I will just give you one more question here, everybody. What is the most common orbital and periorbital tumor? Most common orbital and periorbital tumor in children. The answer is capillary hemangioma. Capillary hemangioma. Okay, so all these questions are asked just straight one-liner questions. So I've given you all these questions listed as one. Which age group, malignant or benign, overall cystic lesion, lacrimal gland lesion, or whatever. Am I clear, everybody? This has also been asked a lot of time. Most common intrinsic lacrimal gland lesion. Please read the word carefully. This is one thing I want to read. Want you to read carefully. If lesion in lacrimal gland is asked, pleomorphic adenoma. But if neoplasm is asked, answer is adenoid cystic carcinoma. Okay, everybody. So I hope you will be able to learn this and you will be able to remember this list. And as I said before, this is all about orbit from my side. I hope all of you have been able to understand the basic differences between two common conditions which you were confused in: cavernous sinus thrombosis and orbital apex syndrome. Also, you have been able to understand orbital varices, carotid cavernous fistula, and all the other questions that I have put forth. Right, guys? So cornea and orbit have been completed in this. Eyelids as a topic is left in this session, which was supposed to be done in this session, but because of yesterday's session, which we were not able to complete. The next session I will take up eyelids in everybody. Now the next session is tonight. I hope all of you join me tonight at 9:30 p.m. So at 9:30 p.m. first I will take up eyelids, and after eyelids I will start with conjunctiva. We are at the fag end of our ophthalmology complete course, guys. We are only left with 2 more sessions. One is tonight, and then one is day after tomorrow, if I remember correctly. But after we finish this part 1 course, okay, after we finish part 1 course in June, there will be part 2 course. In part 2 course, I will take some extra topics which are rarely asked but which are important: dry eye, lacrimal system, and some other topics. Then there will be part 3. Part 3 will be a test and discussion, TND. Okay, everybody. So part 3 will be a TND. That is what we will schedule in June. And if you stick with us in July we will be doing clinical techniques. I will be showing you clinical techniques of how to perform ophthalmoscopy along with patients, of how to record vision, and all those clinical techniques will be shown. Perimetry, conioscopy, tonometry, and all those techniques will be shown to you. So this will be a schedule in June and July. But let's not look that forward. Let's look forward tonight to 9:30 p.m. As always, I hope you like my class. I hope you like my session. If you have liked my session, please feel free to leave some reviews, dedicate some ads, and spread the word amongst your students that Dr. Utsav Bansal is now teaching on Unacademy. Due to the COVID situation, offline classes are very difficult now. So I am on Unacademy online classes. So if any of your friends also want to watch it, please feel free to ask them also to join our Unacademy Plus platform. Bye bye, guys. Have a good afternoon, and let's meet tonight. Bye bye, guys.